The cameras were rolling. The studio audience was laughing. Steve Harvey was in his element, throwing out one of his signature jokes between rounds. And then, without warning, he stopped. Mid-sentence. Mid-breath. His smile faded. His hand went to his mouth. The entire studio fell silent. Something had just happened that no one, not the producers, not the crew, not the families competing for $20,000, had anticipated. A little girl in the audience had raised her hand. And she had asked Steve Harvey one question. One simple, devastating question that would stop the show, break a man known for his unshakable confidence, and remind everyone watching that sometimes, the most powerful moments on television aren't scripted. They're real. It started like any other taping of Family Feud. The Johnsons versus the Martins. Two families, all smiles, all energy, ready to play for the big prize. Steve Harvey walked onto that stage like he always did, sharp navy suit, confident stride, microphone in hand. The audience was pumped. The families were ready. The board lit up with the first question. Name something people do when they're nervous. Standard fare. Easy laughs. Steve was working the room, cracking jokes, playing off the answers. Show me, biting nails. Ding. 32 points. The crowd erupted. Everything was going exactly as planned. But in the third row of the audience, in seat 14, sat a little girl named Emma. 7 years old. Light brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. A bright yellow dress that her mom had picked out that morning because Emma said it made her feel like sunshine. Next to her sat her mother, Claire, who had won these tickets in a radio contest 3 months ago. It was supposed to be a fun day. A distraction? Something normal. Because for the past year, nothing in their lives had been normal. Emma's father, David, had passed away 6 months earlier. Sudden heart attack. No warning. One day he was coaching her soccer team, and the next day, he was gone. Claire had been doing everything she could to keep life stable for Emma. Therapy, routines, family game nights. And when those Family Feud tickets arrived in the mail, it felt like a small miracle. David had loved that show. He used to shout answers at the TV every night, convinced he could win it all. We're going, baby, Claire had told Emma. For Daddy. Steve Harvey stopped mid-joke. The entire studio froze. Because in that third row, a little girl's hand was raised, and her eyes were filled with something that cut through every layer of performance. Every rehearsed line, every joke Steve had prepared. She wasn't playing. She was asking. The game had been moving along smoothly. The Johnsons were up by 50 points. Steve was doing his thing, making fun of bad answers, celebrating good ones, working the crowd like the professional he is. But then, during a break between rounds, as Steve was chatting with the audience like he always does, scanning the crowd for a quick laugh or a spontaneous moment, his eyes landed on Emma. She was sitting very still. Not laughing. Not clapping. Just watching him with an intensity that didn't match the energy of the room. Steve, being Steve, noticed. Hey, little sunshine in the yellow dress, he said, pointing at her. You okay over there? You look like you got something on your mind. The audience chuckled, expecting a cute kid moment. Emma's mom squeezed her hand, smiling nervously. But Emma didn't smile. She stood up. Small. Fragile. And in the quietest voice she said, Mr. Steve, can I ask you something? Steve's smile softened. He walked a little closer, microphone still in hand. Of course, baby. What's on your heart? And then Emma asked the question. Do you think my daddy can see me from heaven? The studio went silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from a dramatic pause. The kind that comes from collective heartbreak. Steve Harvey, the man who has an answer for everything, who has made a career out of quick comebacks and unshakable confidence, stood frozen. His mouth opened, but no words came. He lowered the microphone. His eyes locked on Emma's. And in that moment, everyone in that studio realized they were no longer watching a game show. They were witnessing something sacred. Steve walked down the steps. Off the stage. Past the podiums. Past the cameras. Straight to Emma. He knelt down in front of her, his expensive suit wrinkling on the studio floor, and he took her small hands in his. The cameras kept rolling, but this wasn't about the show anymore. This was about a little girl who missed her father, and a man who understood grief more deeply than most people knew. "Baby," Steve said, his voice cracking, "your daddy sees you. Every single day. Every moment. He's so proud of you." Tears were streaming down his face now. Steve Harvey, the man who makes millions laugh, was crying on national television. And he didn't care. Emma's lip trembled. "I miss him so much." "I know you do, sweetheart." "I know." The audience was in tears. Grown men wiping their eyes. The competing families had stepped away from their podiums, no longer rivals, just witnesses. Emma's mother, Claire, had her hands over her mouth, sobbing quietly. One of the producers in the booth signaled to keep the cameras rolling. This was real. This mattered. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Steve stayed there with Emma for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 2 minutes. He didn't rush. He didn't perform. He just held her hands and let her cry. And then he did something no one expected. He took off his suit jacket, the tailored navy jacket that probably cost more than most people's rent, and he draped it over Emma's shoulders. It swallowed her tiny frame, the sleeves hanging past her hands. "This is yours now," he said. "And I want you to know something. Every time you wear this, or even just look at it, I want you to remember that your daddy's love didn't go anywhere. It's still here. It's in you. And it's bigger than anything you'll ever face." Emma looked up at him, her eyes red but somehow lighter. "Really? Really?" Steve stood up, wiped his face, and looked at the audience. "Y'all forgive me," he said, his voice still thick with emotion. "But some things are more important than a game." The audience erupted into applause. Not the polite, prompted applause of a TV show. Real applause. The kind that comes from people who just witnessed humanity at its best. But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the producers in the booth. "Stop the clock. I don't care about the schedule." Then he turned back to Claire, Emma's mother. "You come up here too. Both of you." Claire made her way down from the audience, Emma still wrapped in Steve's jacket. Steve put his arms around both of them. "I lost my father when I was young," Steve said, his voice steady now but still raw. "And I spent years wondering if he was proud of me. If he knew who I became. And it took me a long time to realize that love doesn't end when someone leaves. It just changes form." He pulled a card from his pocket. His personal business card. He handed it to Claire. "You call me if you ever need anything. I mean that. Anything." Claire nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming down her face. The Johnson family, who had been leading the game, stepped forward. The dad, Marcus, walked over to Emma and knelt down beside her. "My daughter's name is Emma too," he said. "And if it's okay with you, I'd like to give you this." He pulled off a small bracelet his daughter was wearing, a simple beaded thing with the word hope spelled out in plastic letters. "My Emma made this for me when I was going through a hard time. I think your Emma needs it more right now." Emma took the bracelet, her small fingers tracing the letters. "Thank you," she whispered. The Martin family, the competing team, joined them. Then the audience members started standing, one by one, until the entire studio was on its feet, not applauding, just standing in solidarity with a little girl who had asked the question every grieving child wonders, "Can my loved one see me?" Behind the scenes, Steve made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. He didn't just comfort Emma and move on. He stopped the entire production. For 20 minutes, the show didn't air. Instead, Steve sat in the audience with Emma and her mother, talking about grief, loss, and hope. The cameras were off. This was just for them. Later, the producers would splice the footage together, editing around the deeply personal moments Steve insisted stay private. But what aired was enough. Enough to break the internet. Enough to remind millions of viewers that television, at its best, isn't about entertainment. It's about connection. Steve later told the crew, "I don't care if we run over. I don't care if we have to reshoot. That little girl needed to know she wasn't alone. And if we can't stop a game show for that, then what the hell are we doing?" The episode did air 3 weeks later. The moment between Steve and Emma became one of the most watched clips in Family Feud history. Over 50 million views in the first week. Thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories of loss. Parents thanking Steve for showing their children that it's okay to grieve. That it's okay to ask the hard questions. But for Steve, the real impact wasn't measured in views or viral moments. It was measured in the dozens of letters he received from families who had lost loved ones, thanking him for creating a space where grief wasn't hidden or rushed past. It was measured in the jacket, that navy suit jacket, that Emma still wears on hard days, even though it's far too big for her. 3 months after the episode aired, Claire sent Steve a letter. In it, she told him that Emma had started talking about her father again. Not with the same crushing sadness, but with warmth. With memory. With love that had found a new shape. She told him that the jacket had become a kind of armor for Emma, something she wore when she needed to feel brave. And she told him that the question Emma asked that day in the studio wasn't just for Steve. It was for every child who has ever lost someone and wondered if they're still connected. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. A year later, Emma and Claire were invited back to Family Feud. Not as audience members. As guests. Steve brought them on stage during a celebrity charity episode, and he did something unprecedented. He handed Emma a microphone. "I want you to tell people what you've learned this year," he said. Emma, now 8 years old, stood on that stage in a new yellow dress, this one with sunflowers embroidered on the hem, and she spoke with a clarity that silenced the room. "I learned that love doesn't leave when someone dies. It just lives in different places. It lives in the people who hug you when you're sad. It lives in the memories you keep. And it lives in the things people do when they see you hurting." She looked at Steve. "Like giving you their jacket." Steve's eyes filled with tears again. He didn't even try to hide it this time. The audience gave Emma a standing ovation. But more than that, they gave her their attention. Their respect. Their witness. That jacket, the one Steve gave Emma that day, became a symbol. Not just for her, but for the show. Family Feud started a segment called Moments That Matter, where they highlighted stories of resilience, connection, and love from their audience members. It wasn't about the game anymore. It was about the people. Steve Harvey often says in interviews that the Emma moment changed him. "I've hosted a lot of shows," he said on a podcast months later. "I've made people laugh, I've given away money, I've had celebrities and viral moments. But that little girl taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn, that the most important thing we can give someone isn't an answer. It's our presence." The jacket still hangs in Emma's room. She's outgrown it now, but it doesn't matter. It's not about the fit. It's about what it represents. And on days when she misses her father, on birthdays, on Father's Day, on random Tuesdays when grief hits without warning, she pulls that jacket off its hanger and wraps herself in it. And she remembers that her father's love didn't end. It just found new hands to hold her. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Steve Harvey didn't just stop a game show that day. He stopped the world, for just a moment, and reminded us all that beneath the jokes and the lights and the buzzers, we're all just people trying to make sense of loss, trying to hold on to love, trying to believe that the people we've lost are still somehow with us. And sometimes, the answer to that question, "Can my daddy see me from heaven?" isn't found in theology or philosophy. It's found in the kindness of a stranger who takes off his jacket and says, "Yes. He sees you. And he's so proud." That's the legacy of that moment. Not a viral clip. Not a ratings boost. But a little girl who learned that love is bigger than death, and a man who learned that sometimes, the most important thing you can do is stop everything and just be present. Emma is 11 now. She still watches Family Feud. And every time Steve Harvey walks onto that stage, she smiles. Because she knows something most viewers don't. She knows that behind the suit and the jokes and the larger-than-life persona, there's a man who understands grief. A man who stopped a show because a little girl needed to be seen. A man who gave her his jacket, and, in doing so, gave her permission to believe that love never really leaves. It just changes form. And that jacket? It's not just fabric anymore. It's proof. Proof that sometimes, the most important question you can ask is the one that breaks your heart. And the most important answer is the one given not with words, but with presence. Steve Harvey didn't save Emma that day. He simply showed her that love, real love, never stops watching.